I never thought one glance could change the course of my life. It happened on a Friday night, in a corner bar where I usually went to be invisible. I wanted a drink, maybe a quiet hour to myself. Instead, I saw him. Alex wasn't the type you could overlook. Not because of how he looked, but because of the way he carried himself. Like the world hadn't managed to crush him yet. He laughed at something a friend said, and for a moment, I caught myself watching him longer than I should have. I reminded myself that I was there to disappear, not to get tangled in someone else's orbit. Then he noticed me. A nod, a half smile, and before I could look away, he was walking over. Mind if I sit? I should have said no. I should have gone back to staring at my drink. But I didn't. From the first few minutes, there was an ease between us I hadn't felt in years. We talked about music, the city, the kind of things people share when they don't expect to meet again. But his questions started cutting deeper. Where I grew up, why I was alone, what I wanted out of life. He listened in a way that made me feel exposed. By the time last call came, I was caught between two instincts: protect myself or let this connection pull me in. Alex didn't ask for my number. He just handed me his and said, "If you feel like not disappearing next week, call me." I told myself I wouldn't. But 3 days later, my thumb was hovering over his name in my phone. One message turned into 3, then a daily stream of jokes, confessions, and late-night calls. It felt reckless. I was older, settled, careful, and here he was, shaking everything I thought I knew about myself. Our first meeting outside the bar wasn't planned. I was running errands downtown when I spotted him across the street. He grinned, crossed over, and without asking, fell into step beside me. There was a defiance in how easily he made space for himself in my day. We found a bench by the river, and the conversation shifted. He spoke about his family's silence after he came out, how friends vanished overnight. He didn't flinch while saying it, like he had already learned to live with the weight. But I could hear the hurt under the calm. Something in me shifted. I'd spent years keeping my life safe and contained, telling myself it was better that way. But Alex had scars and still managed to stand in the open. That scared me more than I wanted to admit. Before we parted, he said quietly, "You don't have to tell me everything, but don't hide from me." I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew that letting him in meant more than just company. It meant risking the life I'd built, the walls I'd kept up for years. And yet, as I watched him walk away, I realized I already knew my answer. I told myself I could keep things light, that meeting Alex didn't have to change anything. But every time we talked, I found myself giving away pieces of my life I hadn't shared in years. He asked questions no one else dared to, and I answered without thinking why. We started meeting more often, coffee after work, long walks through the city, aimless hours that somehow felt urgent. But I kept my guard up in public. I noticed the way people's eyes lingered when they saw us together. Maybe I imagined it, but the tension in my shoulders wouldn't go away. Alex picked up on it one evening when we were sitting in a quiet park. "You act like being seen with me is dangerous," he said. "It's complicated," I replied. "It's only complicated if you make it that way." His confidence was infuriating. He didn't seem to care who judged him, while I'd built my life around avoiding that judgment. Then one night, the balance cracked. I invited him to a small gathering at a friend's apartment. My first step toward letting him into my world. But before we left, a friend pulled me aside. You know Alex used to date Ryan, right? Ryan, one of my closest friends, someone I trusted. The words hit harder than I expected. I asked Alex about it later, and he didn't deny it. It was nothing serious, he said, but that didn't stop the unease from growing. For days, I avoided him. Messages went unanswered. I told myself it wasn't jealousy, just caution. But the truth was simpler. I didn't like realizing there were parts of his life I knew nothing about. When we finally met again, the air between us was heavier. He looked at me like he already knew I was pulling away. "If you're going to leave, just say it," he said. "I'm not leaving," I answered, though even I wasn't sure if it was true. That night, walking home alone, I realized how quickly things had shifted. What started as a spark now felt like a choice I'd have to make, whether to keep him at a safe distance or risk the fallout of letting him all the way in. The next time we met, Alex was different. He didn't say it, but I could feel the distance. Not the kind that comes from space, but from disappointment. I tried to act as if nothing had changed, but he wasn't letting me off that easily. "You're still hiding," he said after a long silence. "Not just from me, from everyone." I wanted to argue, but he was right. I hadn't told my family about him. I hadn't told most of my friends. And the thought of doing so tightened something in my chest. We decided to go out for dinner that night. It was the first time we were in a busy place together since the gathering at my friend's. The moment we walked in, I noticed people looking. Some glances were quick, others lingered. I tried to ignore it, but Alex noticed. "You're doing it again," he said quietly. "Doing what?" "Acting like being with me is something to hide." I didn't answer, and the silence between us was louder than the noise in the restaurant. The following week, I visited my sister. We were close, and I thought maybe I could finally tell her. But as soon as I mentioned Alex's name, she asked how old he was. When I told her, her face tightened. "Do you really think this will end well?" she asked. "People will talk." It wasn't just what she said. It was how certain she sounded. I left her house with the weight of her words pressing harder than I wanted to admit. A few days later, Alex texted, "When do I get to meet the rest of your life?" I stared at the screen for a long time. I wanted to give him what he was asking for, but the truth was, I was afraid of what that would mean. When we met again, I told him about my sister. I expected him to be angry, but instead he just looked at me steadily. "They don't have to like me. I just need you to stop apologizing for me existing." That hit harder than anything he'd said before. He wasn't asking for perfection or approval, just honesty. And I realized that if I couldn't give him that, then whatever we had wouldn't last. Alex didn't push after that conversation, but the distance between us felt sharper. We still met, still talked, but there was an unspoken question hanging over every moment. Would I ever stop keeping him in the shadows? The turning point came on a Saturday. He invited me to a small art show downtown. I almost said no, worried about who might see us, but something in his voice made me agree. The room was crowded, and the moment we walked in, a few people I knew spotted us. One of them, a colleague from work, raised an eyebrow. I pretended not to notice, but Alex did. He didn't let go of my hand. Later, in the corner of the gallery, he looked straight at me. "Do you see how nothing bad happened?" I didn't answer. You've built a prison no one else can see, and you're the only one holding the key." Before I could respond, another acquaintance approached. They made polite small talk, but their eyes kept flicking between me and Alex. As soon as they left, the old fear crept in again. On the walk back to his apartment, the tension finally broke. "I can't keep being your secret," Alex said. "It's not about you," I replied. "That's the problem. It never is." We stopped on the sidewalk. He was waiting for something I didn't know how to give. I wanted to tell him that the stares, the whispers, the judgment, they weren't things you could just ignore. But I also knew he'd never accept that as a reason to hide. 2 days passed without a word from him. On the third, I sent a message. "Come over tonight." He agreed. When he arrived, I told him we'd invite a few friends to dinner next week, mine and his. His face softened, but I could see the doubt. "Are you doing this because you want to, or because you're afraid of losing me?" "Both," I admitted. He nodded slowly. "Then let's see what happens." It wasn't a resolution. It was a risk, and for the first time, I felt ready to take it. The dinner was set for Friday. I spent the whole week caught between anticipation and dread, rehearsing conversations in my head. Alex didn't seem nervous. He treated it like any other evening. For him, the risk wasn't being seen, it was being hidden again. The first guests were my closest friends. They knew me well enough to sense when something was different. But I didn't give explanations until Alex walked in. The room quieted for a beat. I took a breath. "This is Alex," I said, "and he's someone important to me." There was no dramatic reaction. A few nods, a couple of polite greetings. Then the conversations resumed. For a while, I thought maybe I'd exaggerated the danger in my mind. But when one friend asked Alex how we met, and he answered without hesitation, I caught the sideways glances. Later, my sister arrived. Her smile was thin. She pulled me aside in the kitchen. "You're really doing this?" she asked. "Yes. You know what people will say." "I know. I also know I can't live my life for them." Back in the living room, Alex was holding his own in conversation, laughing easily. Watching him, I realized how much time I'd wasted worrying about reactions that, in the end, didn't change who we were. After everyone left, the apartment was quiet. Alex sat beside me. "You didn't hide once tonight," he said. "I didn't want to." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. That's all I needed. Over the next weeks, not everyone was supportive. A few friends pulled away. My sister still made her disapproval known. At work, I caught whispers I wasn't meant to hear. But I also found something I hadn't expected, a core of people who accepted us without hesitation. Their support made the rest easier to bear. One evening, as we walked along the waterfront, Alex said, "You can't control how people see you, but you can decide how much it matters." He was right. I'd spent years making choices to avoid judgment, only to realize the cost was higher than the stares or whispers could ever be. Being with Alex didn't erase the challenges, but it forced me to decide which mattered more, comfort or truth. And once I chose, I couldn't go back.